Welcome to the fourth episode on the life of St. John of the Cross. Today, we see him as the Confessor of the Incarnation Convent and some of the events which followed this new appointment. It was at the request of St. Teresa to the Apostolic Commissary Don Pedro Fernandez. Teresa, who left the Incarnation Convent in 1962, gets appointed as the superior of that convent after 9 years. During those 9 years, she had already founded 8 Carmelite convents, cloistered Carmels. And the Apostolic Commissary as well as the superiors were pleased by the good efforts of the reform. And Don Pedro Fernandez wanted that she do the same also in the Incarnation Convent. The Incarnation Convent in her time consisted of more than 150 members. 1/3 of them were not nuns in the proper sense, but a sort of beatas. That means single women, spinsters, who could not get married by the fact that a good number of young men, Spaniards, were killed in the war between Spain and Mexico. So these women could not find a proper match. Instead of marrying anyone, they preferred to remain spinsters, bringing the share of their paternal property and sought admission in monasteries like Incarnation. And naturally, they could not abide with the strict rules of a religious community. Mainly, they want to go out at any time they wanted. They received visitors at any time. And in the course of poverty, they had their own luxurious life, no silence, and also it affected their prayer life. So, Pedro Fernandez wanted that Teresa go back to Incarnation and introduce some of the reforms. Naturally, a good number of sisters of the Incarnation Convent resisted this new appointment because they thought that she was going to introduce the strict observance of the rules, enclosure, and poverty, and so on. And it is when she was taken to Incarnation Convent by the provincial and some of her friends, the sisters refused to open the main gate. And the provincial, knowing that there is a small door that connects the convent chapel and the choir, the prayer room of the nuns, succeeded in putting her inside the convent, the new superior. But through the humble, cordial and gentle approach of St. Teresa to the nuns, she could bring about an external discipline. She controlled the visits. She controlled the nuns going out any time. There was the observance of silence and the life of poverty and so on. And she knew that change is mainly the external lifestyle. To have a lasting effect, there should be an inner change, inner conversion among the nuns, for which she wisely thought that a good confessor and spiritual director would be needed. Naturally, her first choice was St. John of the Cross. So she persuaded the Apostolic commissary Don Pedro Fernandez, and with the permission of the superior Father Antonio, John was brought to Avila. Avila is a small hill. Up above is the monastery of the fathers, and down in the valley is the convent. So between these two institutions, if we to go down, we need a little more than 5 minutes. Maybe we may need about 10 minutes to climb up. And in the first 1.5 years, John was staying with the fathers and going to the convent during the day to celebrate Mass, to hear confession, spiritual direction, etc. But in that community of the fathers in Avila, there were some members who embraced the lifestyle of the reform. And John and his companion also were among them. So those who followed the former lifestyle were not happy. There were sometimes wounding remarks, insults about these reformed Carmelites. And John was sharing his painful experience with Mother Teresa. And Mother said, in that case, Father, please come and stay in an outhouse attached to the convent. So John and his companion, Father German, would now live in the outhouse, but attached to the convent. So which infuriated the fathers in the monastery. And using the certain directions given by the then general chapter, which John did not belong to that territory and jurisdiction, they wanted to take these fathers out from the outhouse and be brought to the monastery of the fathers. And with the help of police and some men and these fathers, they were captured and were brought to the Carmelite fathers, Carmel del Monasterio del Carmen. And they were asked to give up their reformed lifestyle and embrace the former way of life, which John could not accept. Though they tried to allure him by so many promises, like making him superior of a big monastery and giving him a good library and giving a golden cross, etc. But John was not happy with all those things, and he remained firm in his decision to the reformed life he embraced, for which it cost him. So the community blamed him of being disobedient, rebellious, and contumacious, that is, stubborn. So until you change the new lifestyle and come back, you will be sent to prison. And during those few days in the monastery of Carmel of the fathers, they whipped him. And as a curse, that monastery now is a prison. And after almost a week, both John and German were shifted to another monastery in Toledo, which is about 150 kilometers from Avila. And they were imprisoned. You need a little explanation about this prison in the monastery. In big monasteries, there were, those days, 1 or 2 rooms or cells for the monks who violate some rules, who disobey the superior, or when there is some sort of indiscipline and lack of observance, they would be imprisoned in those 2 rooms, in one of the rooms. That means they have no community acts. They have no possibility of celebrating the Mass. food would be given in their rooms. They cannot go out. So they will be freed when they abide with the decisions of the superiors. So John and companions were taken to Toledo for this rigorous imprisonment. That lasted for 8.5 months. When we speak about the passive night of the Spirit, we will see the bitter experiences he had in the prison. And somehow, after 5 months, the atmosphere changes because the first jailer, who was very harsh and very strict and rather cruel, who ill-treated John and the companion. In the month of May, a second jailer who was a young priest who was kind, maybe he knew John even earlier. And one of the things John asked was to give him some paper and pen. Thus John, who composed the poems in his mind, started writing them down. And we will see those poems later. And somehow he was feeling a sort of inner urge to escape from this prison. Because either he should give up the reform or the superior should allow. And superior were adamant not to allow him until he gives up the reformed lifestyle. And the immediate occasion for his escape was something that happened in the evening of 14th August 1578. John was kneeling down and touching the forehead on the floor, almost like prostrating, was praying. The superior Father Maldonado entered the room, and John did not move because he thought it was a jailer who often coming in and out, and each time there is no need of getting up. So he continued that prayer that way. And Maldonado shouted, "Did you not know that I am here to see you?" John apologized and said, "Father, I didn't know that was you. I thought that the jailer." And after a few words of rebuke, Father Maldonado asked him, "What were you thinking so deeply as to not to perceive my presence here?" John said, "Father, tomorrow is the feast of Our Lady, and would you allow me to celebrate Mass?" John was deprived of celebrating the Mass for 8.5 months. Now, on the feast of the Assumption of Our Lady, John asked for that favor. And Maldonado, the superior, shouted, "Not in my days!" And that was a real conflict in him. How long will I continue? And he felt, I must escape. So he escaped from the prison between 15th and 18th. We don't know the exact day. Anyway, he had prepared the situation. Because the second jailer was very kind, and during the noon rest time, siesta, he used to take the jailer outside the room and walk in the corridor. And then he could see the sort of panorama across the river Tahoe. And he also noticed the windows. And he decided. On that particular day, when jailer brought the food and went back to get some water, John loosened the bolt, and jailer came and closed it and went away. Unfortunately, on that particular night, two VIPs, the Provincial of Castilla and the Vicar Provincial of Portugal, came to this monastery of Toledo. And they were joined by the superior, Father Maldonado, and these three men were talking until 2 o'clock in the morning. So when they started sleeping, John lifted the bolt and came out. And he had to pass through the two beds which the fathers were put near the entrance because to get more breeze. It was summer. Somehow he managed, and through the window he slipped down. And there were, some people say it was a miraculous escape. There is no need of any miracle because John had tied the two blankets they were given to him. And his own height, about 1 meter and 75 centimeters. And then from there it's only just a little, maybe 1 or 2 meters to touch the ground. And he slowly slipped down and then ran towards the main road, walking over the wall of the fathers. He crossed the market and came and noticed a watchman keeping guard of a palace. Not the king's palace, of maybe a lord or a duke or something like that. And he asked that guard the directions to go to the cloistered Carmel of Toledo. He did not know. He knew that there is a convent, but he never visited that. And that guard gave him all the directions to reach. And John asked permission for him to stay there until the day breaks. And when the day broke, he went and knocked at the door of the cloistered Carmel. And sisters were not surprised because St. Teresa had returned to all the cloistered Carmels to find out if John was imprisoned in one of the monasteries of that area. And they accepted him. Now, how to hide him? Because in no time, the fathers from the same monastery would come there for the Mass. And we have to hide John from them. So they used the canonical provision of making a priest enter the cloister to hear confession of a sick person or to give communion. And it seems that there was a older sister, senior sister, who had to make confession, and John entered the cloister. The fathers came and celebrated the Mass and went back. And then the church was closed. Then John was brought to the church, where out of his joy, he sang aloud the poems he composed. And it is said, the first to listen to his poems were the cloistered nuns of Toledo. The day passed, and what to do with him at night? The prior had a good friend, one Don Pedro Alvarez, was the director of a hospital nearby. Mother explained to him and asked him to take John to his quarters. And in a coach, he was taken and kept there for 6 weeks. Though the father's monastery was nearby, they never knew that John was hiding in that quarters of the director. And by the first week of October, there was a provincial chapter of the Reformed Carmelites in a place called Almodar in Andalusia, when John was appointed superior of El Calvario. And in the next episode, we'll see the new phase of his life, the glorious phase of his life in Andalusia and 3 years in Segovia.